Welcome to another episode of Spotlight with Tim Ladd, the Managing Director of Red Umbrella and Carecoins. Today's episode is really a focus on mental health, the changing landscape of mental health throughout COVID-19, and what individuals and businesses can do to help people that are suffering with their mental health.
Started Red Umbrella in 2014, and that was on the back of my own experiences with mental health. So I had done various things in my life. I'd spent sort of 20 years in Germany working in the golf business. And through that, and my own mental health problems with panic attacks, anxiety, that kind of a thing, I had started to drink, and I was also entertaining a lot. Part of my job was to take golf pros out and make sure that they were happy. So down to the pubs and buy them a meal and drinks, and that became my coping mechanism. So when I got back to a hotel and I was alone, I would start drinking copious amounts of alcohol. That would allow me to sleep, that would allow me to not have the panic attacks and actually just to feel more confident. So as that progressed, that developed into full-blown alcoholism, which took me on a very different plane and actually led to multiple stints in what's called a rehab, the sort of 28-day program. And while I was in those 28-day programs, I realized that there's a sort of sinister side to that industry whereby there's a lot of agents out there trying to match up people to the right rehab. So for example, if you called me about a family member and I was one of those agents and I put you into that rehab, I get a commission for that. And I was aware that that was sort of going on, and I thought we could do this better. I've been now to multiple rehabs. I know what they do there. I've met the therapist. I could even tell you what your room's going to be like, what the daily routine's going to be like. So I thought, why don't I set up a company where we have an ethical way of matching people to the right type of rehab? And that's how Red Umbrella started in around 2014.
I think that's the structure of like your placements. I think from a mental health perspective, I think that's brilliant, because I think the number one problem that we have with NHS provided mental health services is like, it's what's available in your area for a start off, and like you said earlier, like 6 appointments. But I know from doing the therapist trawl of trying to find one, it's like kissing a frog. Like, you have to kiss a lot if you're serious about finding someone that's going to be able to help you. With the sort of Gen Zers and the millennial culture, with the guys that work here, they're so lucky that they're like, I shield them from that completely. Like, there's not a boozing culture here at all. Like, we do have a drink from time to time, and it is a from time to time thing. Whereas what we're talking about is a daily pressure in your job. So do you think that shift, because the Gen Zers and millennials, they don't booze quite the same, and it's not quite such a thing, that you're seeing the masking of mental health problems being stripped back by, actually, this person has got a problem and they don't drink. So therefore, is that the work that you're doing, or would you perceive the work you're going to do with corporations moving forward? You might get straight to the crux of the problem more quickly because there's not the masquerade of alcohol and drugs.
I think there's so many different levels to it. I think it's helpful if somebody isn't drinking or drugging, because anything else that's left isn't caused by that or being masked by it. As you just said, that's helpful, because if you go to a therapist and you are having problems with alcohol or drugs, the first thing that they really need to do is make sure that you're clean and sober to see what they're left with, what are they dealing with. And if you go to a rehab, the first thing they're going to do is put you through the detox so that you're not physically dependent on those substances anymore. And that could be anything, by the way. I mean, we're talking about alcohol and drugs, but there's things like gambling and sex addiction and all of these, even shopping addiction, all of those things. I always feel a bit sorry for the people, that have eating disorders, because that's something as a human being you have to do in order to stay alive, right? Whereas you and I could give up alcohol or give up drugs or stay away from gambling. You can't stay away from food. But to take those things that we obsess to the point of addiction out of the equation, like you said, if someone's not drinking, that just makes life a bit easier to get to what's really going on. So I started up my own business basically quite simple. I can't work for anyone else. So I need to work for myself. That's the foremost. And secondly, it's something we were just talking about earlier, is for me, it's helpful to help others.
Mhm.
So for me, it's helpful to
Mhm.
help others. And I many years was in that golf business. So I was selling golf clubs,
Yeah.
right? And I love golf.
Yeah.
Golf's a passion of mine.
Yeah.
But I got to a point where I didn't really care who bought golf clubs or who didn't, because they weren't very good anyway. You know, at playing golf, it wasn't going to help them. And I felt that I was spending a lot of time with individuals, you know, trying to get them to buy a product that doesn't really make that much of a difference in their life. It makes them happy in that moment. Now we get to work with individuals. We've got a great team of people. It's like a family business, and that's really important. And we get to help individuals on a daily basis, where you get to see the transformation in those people. And we're not doing it for that reason. You know, the reason is it's the byproduct of what we do. It's like you shouldn't set up a business to make money. It should be a byproduct of what you do. And the fact that we get to see people actually change their lives, get on a better track for themselves. And then occasionally we get great feedback. Occasionally somebody will call up one of our members of staff, one of the therapists, they'll pass through the feedback, and it's just amazing. And people have literally gone from something we were talking about earlier, where, you know, you're like a zombie type being, to actually having a life, having a purpose in life. And that's the main reason for doing it. I could not envisage being told things like, I've had jobs where on a Friday I had to have the pie charts in of like how many golf clubs were sold and to who and at what time. And it had to be in by 7 o'clock on a Friday, and reporting and all of this. And that's just not me, not at all.
Do you think that, from what you said previously, we talked about that, I said about shielding the team here and stuff like that, and there's definitely an element of you shielding yourself, but do you think that you're doing this because it shields you?
To some extent.
Yeah.
To some
Keeps you
extent.
straight.
So funnily enough, we were talking about all those stints in a rehab.
Yeah.
I then spent a year working in a rehab.
Yeah.
And that year put me in such good stead, because I was watching people broken, smashed to bits coming through the door every day. And it was a stark reminder of how quickly you'll be back to that position that person's in. I remember this woman that she was clinging onto my arm at the clinic, and she was like, "This is my last chance. You've got to make me well." And she actually held on to me so hard that I drew blood, because her nails were sticking into my arm.
Wow.
And I remember looking into her eyes at the time and just seeing how desperate she was and how quickly I could be back there. Because it's only one drink that's going to lead on a road that goes back to there at some point. For me, as we discussed, it's different for everybody, but that's the way it is for me. In the last bit that we were talking about self-esteem, and I remember once asking a therapist who's like almost like a world-renowned therapist, I thought, I'm going to get this information out of them, and I said, how do you get self-esteem? If you haven't got self-esteem, how do you get it? And he answered me and said, you can get self-esteem by doing esteemable things. Now, esteemable is just a posh word for esteemable.
Yeah.
I would have said esteemable, but apparently you say esteemable,
okay,
right? So by doing esteemable things. And what he meant is that if you serve others, if you do things for others, you will gradually build your self-esteem. And it works. It actually works. I mean, it's why, you know, people that are broken in society and maybe end up for whatever reason, in jail, you get jobs to do in jail. You start to have to serve others to build up your self-esteem again and your confidence. And even sometimes you'll see stars and they've gone off to work in a food bank or something. Now, the ones that are obviously taking pictures of it could be for some other marketing sort of thing. But actually doing stuff like that will start to build your own self-confidence. And it's funny how that works. So when you said that you sort of shield your staff and protect them a little bit from that side of things, that's important to you. And it also gives you that focus and responsibility for others. So for me, myself, yeah, that works, that helping others helps me.
I find that like empathy is a big part of it for the people that have the people that you see in the corporations. I would imagine that And a part of it is like trying to get them to be empathetic as well towards like their actions to others. Because I know that was the transition I made. I was like, oh, maybe my actions towards others aren't as good as what I thought. And then you try to put yourself in their shoes. Well, that's all part of it. And I think we have a massive lack of empathy these days, don't we? It's all so busy.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite obviously talking about social media and things like that earlier, and that's one of those things that this new generation has to put up with. I mean, everybody at all times has a camera with them.
Yeah.
There's this pressure all the time. Someone's filming you, someone's putting it on social media, someone's posting this, and like you say, we're busy people. It's hard to have that sort of empathetic view. Because again, it's our life. It's fast paced. You've got to be seen to be doing this and seen to be there and everywhere. And for anybody that sort of fades away from that because they're exhausted or tired or depressed or they've got problems with alcohol or whatever, they're just seen to be. Well, again, we're going back to that. Why can't you cope with it when I can? That sort of that lack of empathy in those moments.
And then I suppose it is about like whether it is an individual thing. It is your battle.
Absolutely.
Like I always say to people that I talk to them, I say that I can only give you examples with which I'm able to empathetically relate to your situation, so that I can try and make you feel not alone. But your solution isn't my solution. Like all I can do is try and help you think that this is why you're feeling that way. I can give you some advice or some tips. But you've got to go and do that. But we call it the work. Like you've got to go and do the work yourself.
That point you just made about empathy. I mean, if you can't be empathetic, you can be sympathetic.
Yeah.
And if you can't be empathetic or sympathetic, you can still be kind because that's a choice. But a lot of rehabs, for example, don't have gyms for that reason because people just shift. They shift while they're in the rehab to... Now, a lot of people would say, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? That's a great thing to be then focused on your fitness. But what happens if you get injured? What happens if you can't go? What happens if something like a COVID comes along and the gyms are closed? What happens then?
What advice, on a really basic level, what advice would you give to somebody struggling with their mental health right now?
To reach out, not be frightened to reach out, not be frightened to go and talk to somebody that you trust about it, whatever it is. So don't bear that burden alone. Don't suffer in silence. If you're in a corporate environment, there'll be avenues there, maybe some you don't know about. They may have one of these things called an EAP. They may well have mental health first aiders. Ask, find out, maybe reach out to somebody in another company that through your friends. But the main thing is start that process of talking to somebody about it. Don't try and deal with this on your own.
If you listen to your story, the first, I'm sitting there thinking, wow, like this guy takes on loads of people's problems.
Right.
How do you cope with that?
Well, firstly, I mean, we touched on it. I've got a very good team of people as well around me and very good partners, and they are taking a lot of that load as well. But I suppose, for me to get away from that kind of thing, I still to this day am very passionate and love golf. Not a great time in January in the middle of a pandemic to be talking about a bit the opportunities to be able to play, but in good times to get out on the golf course, even if it's on my own, don't necessarily have to be with people, nature, fresh air, that kind of thing. During the pandemic, I've been playing a lot of chess.
Oh, wow.
So I find myself incredibly focused on that. And I was lucky enough to find a chessboard, ready for this, these exist, where you are sitting opposite and the chess pieces move without anyone being there. It works with magnets. So basically you're making a move, the computer makes a move, and on the chessboard it's moving without you having...
Oh, so it's actually playing with proper pieces.
You are actually playing with proper pieces. So I found one of them, got that last year because I knew I wouldn't be able to play golf. So you see, it's thinking ahead and knowing that I need something to occupy my mind. My mind is always worrying. I'm like you, I struggle sleeping. I don't get very much sleep. I've accepted that, 4 or 5 hours, that's it, fine. So my mind is always worrying, it's always thinking. And I found as well, I've got 2 huge boards at home and I write everything down on there now. And a lot of ideas, I try and make them happen. So the business is constantly going. I'm constantly trying to make sure we're going down the right paths and staying ahead of the curve. But I think for me, just to be busy is part of my way of coping, because I used to not be busy.
Yeah.
Because when we're suffering with full-blown things like we were talking earlier, and you spend 3 weeks not doing anything every day except drinking or whatever, that it's actually, you feel the privilege as it grows. The more and more that the workload that there is actually isn't as much as a burden as it is to other people, because it's more of a, you didn't think you were going to ever be in that position in the darkest times.
Yeah. What did you change, and what advice would you give to somebody that's facing a position where they need to change things right now? So what was it that you decided to do, and what advice would you pass on to others?
Well, first of all, we had to make sure we could do everything that we were doing face to face online.
Yeah.
So there's a number of things you can do there. Obviously, you've got to make sure you've got the right accounts with Zoom or Teams or whatever it is that people are using. There's some basic equipment you're going to need, some sort of lighting, that kind of a thing, some microphones so that you can work from home. When it comes to sort of like the mental health side of that, is that once you've got the setup, so you're ready to work from home comfortably, is we're always telling people to have some boundaries. If it's possible, because it's not possible for everybody, is to keep rooms separate. So there's a working room, and anything to do with work is done in that room. But when you leave that room, don't talk about work. And if you've got a family room where you're watching films or something at the weekend, then just concentrate on doing that and don't work, from that room. Keep those boundaries separate. Yeah. I mean, we've even known some people that through this working from home, they literally walk out the door in their business sort of gear, go around the block and walk back in again to make that separation in their mind. And that's really important, because things can become blurred.
Yeah.
I mean, weekends, what was a weekend now? It seems to be the same as every other day, isn't it? So everything, all those lines are becoming blurred. So to try and keep that separation, I think is really important. There's obviously benefits to working from home, obviously.
How have you grown your business?
Yeah.
COVID-19, how have you managed to do that?
I mean, obviously, as we've touched on, COVID-19 has brought a lot of, anxieties and things like that to the forefront, and also made people realise, sort of expose things like, habits, drinking, that kind of a thing. Mental health issues have come to the forefront. People haven't got their coping mechanisms in place. And there's been a lot of people reaching out to us. So we've been able to do things like check-ins with companies, which is really important. So either every 2 weeks or every month, we'll all get on a Zoom call. We've done some ones with companies where there's been 8 people on it, and there's even been ones with 2,000 people on it. And we've done those types of check-ins. So things we wouldn't have expected before. So we've actually grown in this period. So take that mental health first aid training. That used to be face-to-face, but now that we're able to do it online, we're delivering training in India and Canada, and we even did training for 8 people in the Philippines the other month. Now, if you'd have said that, obviously pre-COVID, we wouldn't have thought that any of that would be possible. So also, the fact that we have the Care Coins, which is a sort of pay-as-you-need service, and some of the people have started to utilise their EAPs, these employee assistance programs, quite a bit in this period, and they've realised the shortcomings of them, such as only 6 sessions, or you're not eligible for this, or you're not eligible for that. They've actually gone to this type of a service that we provide. So we've actually, I would say the first 3 months of COVID was really impactful. Everyone cancelling the face-to-face training, and we do a lot of line manager training and things like that. All of that got cancelled. And then once it really was able to officially move online, and we got all the setup needed to do that, actually we've expanded quite a bit on the back half of COVID up to now.
I think that everything leaves a legacy, and I hope that the legacy of COVID-19 will be that it's so much more acceptable to say that you're mentally ill.
I think that would be one of the few positive things that can come out of it.
Since the break of COVID-19, what mental health issues have you seen an increase in?
Yeah, I mean, depression, anxiety are the two big ones that spring to mind, and people just having no idea what the future holds, which is exposed depression and anxiety. Also, loneliness. People have been isolated. Obviously, there are a lot of people that suffer with things like too much time on social media, and now that they have more time on their hands, they've been actually exacerbating that even more. Social media, gaming, that kind of thing. So certain addictions have definitely come more to the fore. So I think that even a person that was sort of like mildly affected by depression has sort of either gone one way or the other during this COVID-19 for obvious reasons.
And what advice would you give to those people, or people that can see that around them or within their circle? What advice would you give to those people?
Again, reach out.
Yeah.
And also, if you want to help other people, check in on them and offer them that lifeline. Ask them an open-ended question that they have to respond to.
Yeah.
Ask people, obviously how they're doing, but give them that lifeline by, maybe let's set up a WhatsApp group with 5 or 6 people on there, or let's have that weekly Zoom call, which I know a lot of people are doing, and they're doing things like quizzes and stuff like that. But if you do notice something different about someone's demeanour, or they're always on camera, now they're off camera, they're not shaving, like when somebody that typically does shave every day, that kind of a thing, just the way that they're dressed. If you notice those things, then just make a note of that and reach out to those people a little bit more. Offer them that lifeline of being able to talk and being able to vocalise.
If someone said to you, I'm going to set up a business, what advice would you give them? What's your big tip?
Yeah, you don't try and, it's very easy, I think, at the beginning to go out and think you need money, right? So you go out and try and get all these loans and try and find people that are going to invest and spend time looking at venture capital. First thing is if you've come up with an idea that you believe in and that you're destined to make it, you're going to make it one way or another, and you don't need all of that. I would say stick with your gut feeling. I mean, think about it. If you wrote a business plan for a business towards the end of 2019, how would that have worked out? So you just put it in saying, I'm going to open up this cafe in the middle of Nottingham, and it's going to have so and so many seats. And then what I'm saying is you've got to be able to adapt. You've got to be able to change when things come along at short notice. But I think when you're just starting out, you've got to have that belief in yourself and not have to reach out to other people for that belief mechanism. Because I think too many people, they get put off by a bank or somebody that's going to look at their business plan, whatever that means, and they take that personally and they kind of stop that journey. I think you've just got to continue to believe in yourself.
I agree. I think that the number one thing that we need to have when you start a business is belief.
Yeah.
If you don't believe it, then it ain't going to work, because you'll just run out of steam.
And so many people, they'll come to you and say, well, that won't work. Somebody else is already doing it. And if no one's doing it, there's a reason. And they don't quite see that niche that you found. And no one will ever have the passion that you have for your own idea for a business. No bank, no investor, nobody's.
I'm a manager, and I've got a team of 5, and one of them is clearly struggling. What is the top tip for me to approach and deal with that person?
Create an environment where you can speak to them. You've got to get that person talking. So make it a really good environment. Invite them into the office for a chat or something, and just say, look, we're going through some really unprecedented times. This is how I feel as well. How are you feeling? Say, I've noticed you're not quite yourself. Is there anything that you would like to talk about? Make them feel extremely comfortable. There's going to be no consequences to that they can talk with you about anything, that you're part of a team, a family, and part of the reason why you wanted them to work in your team when you took them on board was because you respected the fact that you can talk openly and honestly. That was a feeling you had with that person. So build that kind of relationship where that person feels comfortable in talking to you.
So you would say empathise and relate.
Yeah,
Yeah, perfect.
absolutely,
Yeah,
perfectly.
empathise
Yeah.
and relate. Yeah.
Yeah.
What is next? What's your
We want
focus?
to continue to be disruptors.
Yeah.
We want to continue to look for the best way and the most effective way of helping people. And we've talked quite a bit about things like rehabs, and that is something that's very much on my mind and heart for the future. Is we want to be disruptors in that area as well. I mean, I've seen so many of these 28-day programs that cost an absolute fortune that not many people can afford. Right, and back in the day, it was all the sort of stars that were
grand a
going
day, wasn't
to
it?
them. Exactly,
Grand a day.
and I really want to become a disruptor in that space at some point when the timing's right as well. So there's all of those things to look forward to, so watch this space. I mean, we want to be disruptors in that EAP space because people are paying far too much for far too little.
Yeah, for
Sometimes
nothing,
it's literally nothing.
Yeah.
Literally nothing, non-usage. And then also, like I say, when it comes to the residential side, like we've all sat here today, right? And we've had a chat, and we've all been getting along, and people have been able to ask a few questions and things like that. And when I was in the rehabs, the people that were in there, they said, if we could all leave here together and all live together, we would be fine because we're all such good mates and we care for each other, we're looking after each other. And I'm going to find a way of sort of creating that environment in a better way virtually as well.
So that completes today's episode of Spotlight with Tim Ladd from Red Umbrella and CareCoins. Fantastic discussion, really interesting take on what's going on in the mental health space right now and what different businesses are doing to try and help their employees through these really challenging times.